Welcome, Eran, to this podcast. A true pleasure to reconnect with you here and to have you as a guest and to explore together what we will be talking about. As just said, there's not really a set topic or a set of questions. It's just the intention to explore, to get to know more of what there is, to lift a little bit the wheel and explore together what's this reality about. And I remember to just give a little bit of an introduction. The way we actually met was, so I went to a Tony Robbins event. It was called Spiritual Trip. There I listened to Dr. Nadabuto, a cardiologist who was referring about a very holistic approach to medicine, integrating body, mind, and soul. And at that time, that was still something very, very new. And the presentation was really mind blowing. It made me really curious. And he also introduced the concept, not just the concept, the method, the energy washout, right? And that sparked my interest. So I started to investigating to approach him. He was referring to you, Eran, and that's how we first met. And I think in physical form, actually, when you did the energy washout with me. And I guess for those who are listening to that, I think that will be an amazing introduction to maybe quickly share what's the energy washout and why it's so amazing. Yeah, and
I'll be happy to share. Yeah, I really remember. Thank you for having me, first of all. And I'm thinking back, it was about January of last year, so almost a year and a half ago that we met. And I was really happy to connect with you. And I've been practicing energy washout since 2016. So it's been about 4 years. I studied with Dr. Buto in Israel. He teaches in Hebrew and Italian until now. He's going to start teaching in English soon. And as a cardiologist and a researcher and as a very spiritual man, he's kind of connected a lot of ideas together from the East and from the West. And the energy washout, its full name is Energetic Emotional Washout, is the kind of the process that he's created among a couple other processes. And the premise or the idea behind the whole process is this deep connection between body, mind, and spirit, and the fact that our physical pains and diseases and all the things that are happening in our physical body are deeply connected with our emotional traumas, with our emotional well-being, with all the things that have happened throughout our life. And so the energy washout, similar to other healing practices, is one in which we can go into that painful past emotional experiences through working with the body. So the process itself will look like we have a breathing element to it, deep breathing, and we have a little bit of rocking, opening up a flow of energy, similar to any energetic process where you're trying to get energy to flow and move, and this kind of opens you up. And the systems we're working with are the meridians from Chinese medicine, the energy pathways, and the chakras, the energy centers from India. So understanding that our system is not only the organs that we know from biology, but also this energetic system that includes these pathways and centers. So through using different pressure points, actually physically pressing on the parts of the body that represent these energetic components, we are opening up and really releasing. So I'm using this because you can see my heart as an example, but the heart chakra, this heart energy center, holds on to different emotional experiences that are very specific to this region of the body. And by pressing and putting pressure on it when we've breathed and we're kind of opening up our state to experience more, we can bring out the emotions that were suppressed or that our body holds on to, and kind of remind the body what they were, whether through a memory or through an emotion, and possibly release that as well. And with that release, there can be physical healing of physical ailments, and this is what Dr. Bhutto has been able to help thousands of patients with, of healing physical disease and pain through treatment of the emotional aspect that the body carries. I hope that's clear.
No, amazing. Yeah, I remember my first session with you, and it was an incredible experience. It was, I remember running around and like, oh, this is like, this experience is mind blowing. And I think Stefan described it as acupuncture on steroids. It is literally like kind of like cleansing your system. So like it was very intense, and I would rate it like personally, like in terms of like a pain scale from like 1 to 10, it was definitely a 10. Like at that moment, I like when you're kind of like pressing those points, like kind of it was pretty intense. But then also kind of like afterwards, it was really relieving and kind of like letting go of those blockages or tensions, and yeah, I felt incredible light and in peace, relaxed. Yeah, on like, but not just like after, like you would be relaxed after massage or so. Yeah, it was like being like floating and also having this incredible insights into what was there in terms of a blockage. Yeah, and that that's that's something, and like, that's something I wanted to speak with you also today, because that's in my head. To give you a bit of context, like in like, you know, that I'm going, or I went through this training in so-called quantum psychology. Is kind of like philosophy defining your holistic belief system. And I remember having my first encounter, my first training. I was like kind of like, I was challenged. It was like I wanted to come there with my backstory, you know, like explain, like you need to understand first, yeah, in order to help me. And the reaction was, I give a shit, yeah. Your past is not relevant, yeah. And I felt like offended. No, and it was like, yeah, and it was like I'm getting a bit angry. And oh, you need to understand. I am like that, yeah. But then also it planted a seed, and I was like, what if it doesn't matter? Yeah, yeah. And so I felt very triggered by this statement initially. I was like, no, why you don't understand me? Because that's like the usual,
Yeah.
the usual reaction you get. Like if you talk about your past, it's like maybe understanding, or maybe just not caring. But like, and that gave a completely different perspective to me. But then ultimately it was freeing, because I started like, what if it's not, like, what if it doesn't matter? Yeah, what if I can reinvent everything today? And that gave a very different perspective, and also like understanding even deeper that, and that's what I'm so curious to hear your thoughts, like how our beliefs, how our thoughts create our subjective reality. And so I'm curious to hear from you. How would you describe, if you could, like the relation between thoughts and emotions? Do they have a similar origin? Are those different dimensions? Like, are they based on our belief system? So, like, maybe that's as a starting point, because that's something I'm still,
Yeah.
like, thinking. Maybe there's nothing to think about. Yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
No, it's a good question. I like it. And I've heard that before, that same idea of why bother looking at the past, or we can kind of change our mindset now and work with ourselves in the future. And it's less like, is there a need? That's a really good question. Is there a need to go into the past, or to attach to how the past has affected me today? And I think that there's not a contradiction. For me, at least, I don't feel like it contradicts each other. I think it's different approaches of how to work with our minds and our emotions and our thoughts. For me, there's a lot of importance. This is the work that I do, of making that connection, of understanding how my emotions and thoughts that exist today are connected to my conditioning and my past experiences. And it's a way of clearing or changing. um, I feel that it's important. And at the same time, you can do a lot of work and self-development and healing work that doesn't require you to approach the past. And it, again, there's that risk of, if you're looking at the past too much, then you can attach to it and you kind of get stuck on that feeling of, this is what defines me, this is who I am. um, but at the same time, you have to watch out when you're trying to avoid the past, is like, this doesn't matter. Are you pushing something away that is significant and relevant? And that's why the approach that both are important, and they're different paths, I guess, to approach how do I feel better in my emotions and my thoughts, and they're kind of different ways to do that. So I believe that that's just another approach. And
Mm.
when it comes to how do we, our relationship with our thoughts and our emotions, I do believe that there is this conditioning that, our thoughts and our emotions, I can at times put them in the same category of our psyche, of this part of ourselves that's not so much of our physical being, that's more like the animal, that is very, very basic.
Mm.
And it's not our spiritual sense of self, the connection to the soul. It's kind of this middle human ground. So I would put those two together, and then as I would put them together in the same part that I would give the one word of psyche, I can talk about them separately, and how their roles would be different, or they're kind of expressing different parts of our psyche in a different way. Um, so when I talk about them as a whole, I guess as the psyche, they're deeply connected for me to our past experiences. Like, that's what has kind of created. So if I'm looking, like, as a historian, or as someone who wants to research how is today connected to everything that has happened, I can look into the past and do research work to find out how my thoughts, my beliefs, and my emotions have been created by my history, by all the things that have happened to me, by my childhood traumas, by as far back as my mother being pregnant with me and everything that she experienced. Me as a fetus, I'm taking everything in that my mother's experiencing as if it's happening to me. So that's kind of the beginning of the programming of, where does my brain know to react the way it does. And at the same time that I learned all of that, I can not necessarily do that research to know where it came from, and still work and change it at different levels, and change the way my mind thinks, and change the way my emotions are programmed. um, but that's less my expertise, I guess. So
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, it's absurd how we think, but actually don't like think so much. But what I would be curious to hear, because you also mentioned that you just said there's so much conditioning around who we are. What do you think? What are we?
yeah. That's a huge question. And the for me, the basic understanding of that question, which for me personally, it hasn't been like this deep quest to find out who I am, even though it has a part of, like, that question is in the background of all the other questions. um, and for me, what gave me a lot of answers is the work of past life regressions. This world of past lives, and that, like, psychiatrists and psychologists and researchers and hypnotherapists have done research and documented cases upon cases of people who go into a hypnotic state
Mm.
and bring back memories from previous lives, previous times. Some people can be very precise with the years, and very precise. And as much as you can, think it's a story or believe or not believe, people have also healing experiences. And for me, the work of Dr. Brian Weiss, who I also went to one of his workshops in Italy last year or the year before, he has documented in his book so many cases of healing stories of people who are able to, in a hypnotic state, remember their past life.
So I mean, like through going into past lives, you're healing your current life?
Exactly. You're able to heal physical conditions, emotional conditions, relationships with people. So with this and another, Dr. Michael Newton, who does life between life regressions. So this is the same, very similar to past life regressions, but at the end of the past life, you remember or experience how you died, which will then guide you into a space where you are the soul leaving the physical body. And in that space in between lives, so you haven't reincarnated into a new body, there's this kind of in between space. And what's amazing is that hundreds or thousands of patients describe a very similar experience in this hypnotic state. And again, there's no way from here to know how true that is or what's true, but it's just interesting to see that it's repeated itself in the story of how our consciousness can create what happens to us when we die. And for me, this was the proof, or the way for me to kind of believe fully in the existence of us being more than a physical being, and that this soul that can experience lives in different times in history and come back in different bodies in different countries has a kind of purpose, a mission, something to learn. And that's the reason we come back and experience this life. What's always interesting in these life between life regressions, it's really interesting. If you've seen even on YouTube, you can find like live ones that you see someone doing a life between life regression. And it's a beautiful space. For me, it's like to watch someone after the space where they die and they're describing all this light. A lot of times they describe a loved one who's passed coming to greet them, or a spiritual guide, and when I'm watching it, I feel emotional, because it's this very beautiful space where it's like, wow, they're in this pure lack of physicality space, and they're describing it with words as much as they can, even though I think with words it's very hard to describe that. And I feel that resonance with me, that part of me as a soul that feels, wow. And the questions that come up were looking back at the life that was and learning the lessons. So there's not this kind of God that's judging or punishing you. It's much more of this self-discovery of looking back and reflecting and seeing what I could have done better and seeing what I want to learn, and choosing to come back with a mission to learn the unlearned lessons and to kind of figure it out of how I can grow. And that's always the kind of the main purpose. How can I grow? How can I learn? How can I become more or more pure, or return to the light is one of the ways to describe that.
So like from what you're sharing, like we should be excited like to die, right?
It's one of those things that, I mean, for me, it helped me a lot reading the stories of the people. It gives it's like, it makes you excited, and it takes away a lot of the fear. And for some people it doesn't, because that fear is really one of the things that's part of this human experience, is that forgetting of where we came from, and that it's actually a beautiful place, and that we shouldn't be afraid. But there's something about the physical form that we're in that is it's programmed in our conditioning, that same fear of death. So
yeah, thank you very much. I mean, like, let's dive into this a little bit more. But one of the things I wanted to ask you too is, so kind of like you're saying we're soul with the purpose, like to grow, but then also like we have this conditioning, and that's something I have been spending the last months about, and it was very confusing at parts because it was in a way, and I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. It's this concept that like you have your authentic core, it's however you want to describe it, soul, energy, potential, consciousness.
Yeah.
You come to this experience here, and then it's a kind of like the layers of the onions, no, like conditioning about conditioning, which then forms this, you could call it inauthentic shell identity, and we think we are this illusion, like of this physical body with like the programs basically being indoctrinated into us through whatever surrounded us. Like I think the first years are like hypnosis state. Yeah, we're modeling everything without really judging it, and like what I'm now like thinking about, and it's thinking is like to give you also a bit of context. So like over the last months, it was about like being completely challenged and who I think I am in terms of how I identify myself, what I think, and through like why, like asking why behind the why, and discovering the first time like the beliefs I had, still have, yeah, like mostly crap, and not they're in there to limit my potential, to make me a passenger in life, yeah, at best, if not a victim. And if you just look at how our society is operating, it's a negatively competitive environment. There's a lot of negativity out there, and I find these three numbers so shocking. Is I think Bruce Lipton mentioned that 85% of people don't love themselves. They have to believe I'm not lovable. That's kind of shocking. And 80% of employees don't like their job, and basically everybody is working as employed, and 70% say their boss is not competent. So if you just look at our society, it's very negative. So we enter into the society, we get programs basically like preparing us for the works we are supposed to do in this environment. So we end up with all this conditioning, which is not really serving us in the first hand, but those giving us information too, you could say, control us. And like it's a thesis, so I'm happy to hear what you think. But what I want to lead to is, so you end up with this illusion, and you think, but basically you're just executing the programs you adopted. And what I have been challenged with, and like that's my experience now, my perspective changed a lot, is like if I like still like identify myself within this like construct, yeah, of me as an identity or whatever, like 36 years old, like ex-banker, I can do this, I cannot do this, and then there are things to fix, yeah, kind of like, then I'm kind of like working from the position of the illusion to fix something instead of zooming out and realizing there's nothing to fix. I just like have, if I remember who I truly are, and then like looking at every belief, every thought, and it's not about ignoring but looking at, okay, interesting, like giving it a place, no, like, okay, where do you come from, like why do I believe this crap, yeah, and taking down the belief, and basically then like setting an attention, okay, this is not something according to who I think I am, what's the purpose of this life, and like we know so little of reality, we tend to limit us without really having a clue what is reality, no? Why should I limit myself and what I could be, achieve, or do if I have no clue what it, like I think 5%, like 95% is dark matter and energy of what surrounds us. A maximum for 5% we have some scientific models which like are then still not explaining everything. So we really have no clue, but we think we have. And like I know it's a long story, and I give you the word. But what I happen to realize is the magic of just jumping out of this illusion, and it was very confusing. Like it was kind of like in a way brainwashing yourself, not challenging the beliefs you have, and I have not arrived anywhere. I just see where I've been, and it has been kind of a perspective shift. What I'm saying now, this is very thought based. Even though also emotions, like looking at emotions, where do they come from, and like kind of like always sticking back to the belief system. And I'm curious to hear your perspective on this. Like, it's on the one hand, it can be a bit intellectual, yeah, and I also know that the heart is the first organ, I think, when an embryo is building. So there is a second brain also in the heart, and so I'm curious, like this thought emotion connection, like, is it both coming from the same belief? Is like the thought more like brain based, and the heart is another dimension to life, which might, like, pardon my words, like, need to be approached differently, or does it, like, approach is maybe even the wrong word? So, like, long story short, yeah. But so I'm curious to hear your thoughts, and like in context into what I just shared, if that does make sense.
Yeah, mostly. Yeah, for me, even when I'm talking about the soul, the way I described before, it's very easy to intellectualize it and turn it into an idea, right? So any of these ideas can be so easily taken as like, okay, I'm a soul and I'm here to grow. But when we kind of want to implement it or turn it into a system of how do I behave or how do I feel good, I guess is a general question. It kind of can take you in either direction. So it can confuse you, or it can kind of help you, or it can make you feel good. And I feel the same way about the work of the belief system and the emotions. And this is something I remind myself all the time, is like, how do I turn the theory about it into practice? How do I take this intellectual idea of this connection between our thoughts and our belief systems and our emotions into something that I can work with, that actually helps me to function in the world, helps me to feel good, helps me to get things done. And again, this feeling good is the kind of underlying barometer. It's kind of showing you all the time if you're on the right track or not. Um, and to really touch on that connection between the thoughts and the emotions that you keep coming back to. I'm trying to think of the best way to put it, to to make it clear, because this idea is for me, a lot of the work, so that you can call it spiritual work or personal development, or um, as meditation, as you've described it, as kind of like the thoughts come and you can observe them and you're not pushing them away, and this is all in that direction of finding out who is that underneath, right? So we're talking about the layers of the conditioning and all of the what's been programmed in us, and that there's that core that we can call soul, or we can call true self, or our true nature, that's underneath that we're in a constant discovery. And it's so hard to describe that true part of us with words, and even the experience of it is so, it's like as soon as we take it from experience to a description of the experience, we lose the essence of it. It's like the taste of an orange can't be passed on with words. I can talk about it for hours and, you know, write a whole paper on the taste of an orange, but it can't replace actually putting an orange in your mouth and feeling the flavor of it. So when I talk about these past life regressions or the life between life regression as an idea, it can be helpful to know that I'm not, I won't die as a soul, but that idea isn't as strong as actually feeling that moment in which I'm in a state in which I can experience um, that I am this soul and that I can experience what feels like dying in a physical form and going to a non-physical form, and that feeling or that experience or that live way of not experiencing it as an idea can shift something that, even if I don't have the words to talk about it or explain it, something inside of me has kind of learned something new. We can say there are new connections in my brain that now I know something that I may not have known before. So for me, even in the energy washout, this is something that's very deep, because it's reminding the body something that we don't think, if we intellectually think about it, that the emotions that we've experienced in our past are even relevant in our life today. And by reliving them, or by suddenly feeling an experience of pain, and like in your experience, the physical pain is very helpful in kind of bringing out an emotional pain that's usually buried underneath a lot of suppression and a lot of disconnection from that emotional part. Just by reliving it, it's like your experience is, wow, there's something that I didn't think was there that I can feel or I can connect with. And this opens up new pathways in the brain, or a new way of feeling that is real. It's not an idea. We usually try to turn it into idea when we talk and we share and we try to tell people what it was like, or we, as soon as we try to verbalize it or put it in words, it already loses a little bit of that truth that's in the experience itself. Um, so I'm not so sure if I answered your question, but
No, it was no, interesting. It, it's yes, somehow it makes sense. My question then is, okay, like, and those are the things I have been thinking over the last months. It's like, so we are here, yeah, in this reality. It's like intellectually, it's like you cannot make sense too much out of it in like by philosophizing about it. Yeah? But when you're in that state where you feel connected to something larger, and you know that what you're doing, or like or what you're saying is not like because you need to think about it, but it's like you're expressing like something larger, like, and you know you're at the right spot at the right time, and everything makes sense, and that there is a bigger picture to it, and that there's no need to think about the sense or the meaning of life in those moments. And my my question is, no, it's like, okay, what do you think is this, like you said, to grow, yeah, and like actually, like, this philosophy is really really interesting. Yes, it's like, if you look at what we have, no, we have the capacity to destroy or to create, like each of us, no, like we have the two polarities within us. And it can be pretty tough to realize that at like one point, each of us could do like the most evil things on this planet. Each of us has the potential to do that, but then what we still have, like, or what we have, or what we're supposed to have, if we realize it, we have free choice to choose what we want to do with that capacity, you know. And and I'm teasing a little bit now, yeah. But so you could then, okay, like, I'm here, I have the two possibilities to create, and like, it's apparent I'm not just my physical representatives, yeah, like from the experiences and also stories, etc., yeah, but own experiences too. Like, okay, like there is an immense potential just looking at energy forming this representance here, you know. And like, okay, maybe the more responsibility I learn for my capacities to create or destroy, the more of my potential I can actually use. And but then also, like, seeing or realizing, like, we're all coming from the same source. Like, it's not just about like expanding my mind or my consciousness, but doing it together, because anyway, together here. And long story short, again, it's so, if I realize or remember or start like, and if by words and thoughts, it can be very powerful, who I am at my core, and I have this decision or power over decision to create or destroy and to do something. And I remember past conversations we had is like a being versus doing. It's like, but now given that I'm here, it's like, and I realize who I am, like, is there a point to be made? Like, let's create, instead of like delving, and I'm teasing a little bit, delving through the past, if it's somehow an illusion anyway. Like, does it make sense what I said? Like,
Yeah, I
yeah.
understand.
Well, what are your thoughts on this one?
I think that's a really important point, just to start from that ability to destroy and create. So to see that as humans, we really have the full potential of doing good and doing bad, or harming or destroying, or whatever words, and recognizing that, kind of connecting to that part that's not comfortable and doesn't always feel good, but to know that we can be violent and hurt other people and, destroy, is just an amazing starting point, because it can really, just recognizing that can change our planet, because it changes the way we also look at the people in the world who do bad, and they're less distant from us. So there's not all this kind of blaming and becoming a victim of the bad people who do bad things. It's like they're as human as I am, and I'm capable of doing all the most horrible things. Um, and when I can connect, for me, that feeling of connecting to that core of my being is where I have the ability to recognize, to discern, to kind of feel the difference between the creating and the destroying. And there's really a physical, a feeling of, when I'm creating and doing good, I feel good, I feel expanded, I feel like a calling, and I feel, and that's a very clear sign when I feel good, because I'm creating, because I'm helping another person, because I'm thinking a new thought, or I'm starting a new project, or I'm doing something that I feel is positive in whatever way it is. I have that feeling of good, as opposed to that feeling of destroying, whether it's being angry at my girlfriend, or being, just fighting, or feeling scared. There's just a feeling of I'm constructing.
I have a question. So
Yeah.
I would assume that, for example, even like many of my ex-colleagues, they would say they feel good when they have their beer and they watch football. Like,
Yeah.
would that be a good like indicator that
I would question that, because I would ask them the difference between the feeling good, which I'm questioning a lot, of the feeling good of drinking a beer and watching football, and the feeling good of, connecting with someone deeply, with a heart-to-heart conversation, or connecting with a child, or doing something that's helpful for someone. And even though intellectually it's easy to say, this is what makes me happy when I'm just drinking a beer and hanging out, if I can really connect to the truth behind it, for me it's clear. And I think just by having that conversation and comparing the different kinds of feeling good, you can start to feel the difference. And the feeling, when you're more connected to your physical body, and you can really tell when you're aware, and this any meditative practice, or any kind of body practice, where you learn to feel the difference in how I'm feeling in my body while I'm spending time with certain people as opposed to other people, and how I'm feeling in my body when I'm doing things that are helpful, or doing things that are more shallow or conditioned that I'm supposed to do, so it's kind of growing out of the things that I maybe thought for many years that make me feel good, for me, that's what happened. The things that for many years were, at least at the thought level, this is what fun is, or this what feel good, became less and less fulfilling, and I was not drawn towards them. I think this has kind of been interesting in this time when we're all stuck in our homes. It's like, what are the things you deeply miss? And are people deeply missing their, sports games or hanging out with their friends? Or what is the thing that you're really at that deep level, and not the kind of covering up how I'm feeling level, which can easily be that the football matches I don't want to face myself, and the emotions that are present that I'm so busy suppressing, because if I look at them, then I have to face my life and face all these questions of, am I on the right path? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Is this environment that I'm in the best environment for me? And these questions are so difficult to face because they really question our whole life experience. And it's so much easier for most people to just cover those up. Why ask? Or I can't ask because it will, question this identity of who I think I am and what I think is important. But as soon as you really face that, it's like, wait, the doing good, the deeply connecting, the creating in this world is what fulfills me. Um, and this is what can guide me to go in that direction, and to guide others in that direction, and to make the world a better place. Um,
Yeah, beautiful. So it's like asking question and then feel like, and like what feels right.
yeah, yeah. And it's hard. It's something that you really need to practice, because when we haven't practiced that, we can think that something feels right when it's not fully feeling right. And it takes time, and it takes that intention, that willingness to want to do that, to want to connect. And for me, that wanting to connect, it needs, it maybe doesn't need us to face our past, but it needs us to face the uncomfortable emotions that for me connect directly to the past, because that's where they come from. But when it's like, once I connect to my body and let myself feel, and I'm in a situation, because life is very good at showing us that there are unresolved issues in our life. And it doesn't matter how much we think we've done it all, there'll be something that will come in our path that will be like, in your face, you thought you figured everything out. This is for you to learn, and to see that there's more to learn. And you face, if you're connected and you're able to feel that, you face that uncomfortable feeling of, this doesn't feel good in my body. I'm not in a place that I like the feeling of it. And facing that is an opportunity to say, in my perspective, where did that come from? And this isn't the first time I'm encountering this. And for me, just in making the connection between my experience today and when I've experienced the same thing in the past, the same emotional experience, the same pain, the same questions, it makes a connection that brings some kind of relief, because it's like, okay, this isn't the first time, and I've done this before, and I can see that somehow the past and the present are connected, and I can make a change today that will affect how I react when this happens again in the future, if it does.
Yeah, I remember a couple of things we already talked about in the past, and especially one of them stuck with me, and that's your description of the different states of love, and that, like, at the end, like, we are love, if I remember that right. And maybe you like, I don't know if something changed in the meantime, or if it's still like a similar description, but I would love to hear in your words like the different stages of love, and how like there's a relationship between the stages, and like also what's a possible way to go through these stages if there is.
Yeah. It's funny when I hear that, because I've heard within the, people at spiritual festivals or spiritual teachers, and just saying those words, I am love or we are love, it resonates differently at different times. So sometimes I have a hard time even saying it, because if it's not coming from the right place, I really have a lot of resistance to it. It's like almost like it's when it's presented as an idea, it can almost do more damage than good, because it's, I don't know how to exactly explain that, but it's presented off. But I do believe at the truth of the statement of I am love, that there is truth to that, and it will help to really kind of explain the stages, because then it will connect us more to that, how what that really means, and kind of try to bring it down to the ground also more practically. What does it mean? So when I've taught in the retreats you've come to, we talk about the four circles. So it's kind of this evolution of love, and of how we experience love as we are born into the world and continue. And just as a general idea, the concept of love, or the experience of love, or the importance of talking about love is in a way a foundation, because for me it's like a compass. So this word love, or this concept love, or this idea of love has a way of navigating us in life. There are others like truth, or like joy, or I mean, each one has a very specific power to it, and love is one that resonates with me very deeply as a very deep principle or experience that can navigate and help me see when I'm in that creating space, in a space in which I'm doing good or not. So that connection or disconnection from love is kind of a barometer. It helps me really feel the difference. And love is a beautiful, and it's a very distinct experience, that just the word has so much strength to it that anyone can relate to it as an experience. And if you've truly had those moments with a partner, with one of your parents, a family member, a child, that you've connected to that feeling of love, it stays with you, and you can look back at it and remember. So just to give a perspective of what is this love, and how does it even help, and why are we talking about it. And that first stage of love is that most basic, uh, coming into the world and being dependent on the love of others, of the mother. I guess even in our womb, we're completely dependent on the mother providing us and nourishing us. And as a baby, we're completely dependent on the love of our mother and the love of our surroundings that allows us to give. And as a stage of evolution, I guess we can see this as the first stage in which I am nourished by love, and I seek to receive love from others. And this is important to identify as a stage of the evolution of love, because a lot of us are still stuck there in certain aspects of our life. And we start to identify that in a lot of times or moments in our life, we're just looking to get that love that was missing. And we usually get stuck there because we didn't get as much as we would have liked to, or we felt that the flow of love from our mother or father or surroundings wasn't as fully flowing. So it kind of got stuck, and we're kind of searching it. So we're going and looking for, where does this love come from? And as we grow up and become more active in our evolution as children, we realize there are things we can do in order to receive that love. So we move into this stage in which we're active, we're not completely dependent, we can do things in order to get this love, but it's still dependent on the receiving of love from our parents, from the environment. But now we have a little bit more of a control. And a lot of us are also stuck here when we start to notice and feel our behavior in our daily lives. There's that all the things that I'm doing that aren't fully nourishing and right for me, and we can put them in the category of destructive behavior, of which I'm doing things for the wrong reasons. And even though it's a very natural, and I'm not judging it, but I'm doing something in order to receive recognition, love, acceptance from the environment. And the reason it's destructive is because I'm not realizing, and this is the third stage, that I have the ability to give the love to myself and to nourish myself. And by doing things that aren't truthful with what I really want to do and with myself, only in order to receive from the environment, and this isn't a bad thing, it's a natural thing, but by doing that, I'm not nourishing myself. So that third stage is where I can kind of do the actions, do different things that are that I can actually do, but they're with that direction pointed inward. So I'm nourishing myself with love. I'm connecting to feel, connecting to myself, and doing things that are really good for me. And this is where I can start to be a creator. And it really has to start for many of us within ourselves. So a lot of teachings and religions talk about loving others, but we confuse that so much with the loving in order to get. Even a religion that says, I need to give and do good so that I get the love of God, or the love of, or to be a good person who's not doing bad, I'm still doing in order to get. So this shift is important, moving into that third stage of evolution where I'm nourishing myself, where I see that I don't have to be so dependent on the environment and on my parents. This, for me, is what growing up potentially could be if we go into tribal, ceremonies of becoming a man, or, moving from the space of a child to an adult, is that understanding and practicing that independence of nourishing myself and not needing that dependence of the love of others. And once I've started to master that, or at least kind of connected and moved away from the doing in order to get, then I can move into that fourth stage, which we'll call is we are love, which is that deep connection and the feeling that love is always present, and that it's nourishing me in a way that I can nourish myself, but it's nourishing me in a way that I can also give it to others without expecting. So we'll call this unconditional love. And the love of parents for their children can have that element. It's something we can recognize. We're not always there because we easily go into the giving in order to get, but it has the potential, and even just connecting to it a little bit, of remembering that there is almost like an endless potential of love that exists in the air. You can compare it to God, or to some energy in the universe that's everywhere and that fills everything. So this love is like this endless potential that, once I connect to it, and there are all these ways that I can connect to it and kind of recharge and know that I'm nourished, then it can flow through me. And the examples of that would be that feeling of creating, that feeling of giving to others and doing it not because I want something in return, but just because it flows out of me in this natural way. So musicians can feel that when they're creating music, and they're not even intending necessarily to make others love you, although it can get very easily mixed up, but it's like, I just have to create this. It's coming out of me with this pure form of creation. And that's that glimpse that we can kind of feel of this experience of being love, of manifesting or being an expression of love.
That's wonderful. And yeah, I've had a few experiences where I would describe with unconditional love, where it's like kind of, I was crying looking at the flowers and running around. It was just beautiful, everything. I think I know the answer because we spoke about this before. But what, and also what I mentioned before, 85% of the population don't love themselves. So like they would be in like the first or the second phase of the evolution. So what would be something we as a society should be doing to, or reflect upon to like proceed in our evolution?
Yeah.
Are there concrete steps to like we can do to give us the self-love, but then also to get into this unconditioned love?
It's really a gradual thing. So I don't see the world tomorrow to, that 85% of people who don't love themselves turning into 50%. And it's really something that I believe is possible, but will take time. And when I look at the individuals, because I really believe that our work is each person in their own life. To do healing work or to do spiritual practice or to meditate has a deep impact on your own life, which is a shifting of consciousness of everyone. And for me, the most practical and basic idea is to do what feels good, right? So there's that, what is it that nourishes me, and being truthful about it, and moving beyond that. We're kind of lucky that now we don't have all the sports and the bars and the cinemas to kind of cover that up, so we can kind of look, if I don't have all those external things in my life, what really nourishes me and makes me feel good. And sometimes before I can even start doing good for the world, just by me giving myself that attention and asking what is loving for myself, what is the most loving thing that I can do for myself, and taking steps. It's not always this black and white, tomorrow I'm going to be loving to myself. It's like, is there one thing today that I can do that is more loving, that is nourishing me, that is taking care of me, that is being kind to myself? And it can be something big like leaving your job that you're feeling bad or that you're not aligned with. And that's a very loving thing that's bigger, but it has to build up. You can't reach that in one day if you're not doing the steps along the way to ask, can I feel good? And what is the things that nourish me? And what is it that I really want to do in my life? So the end point is still wanting to make the world a better place and to give to others, but I really feel that this has to start with that nourishing, that really filling that emptiness that we all carry a lot. For people who have done that, who are kind of a few steps after, who have filled their cup and done a lot of things that are good for them, then it naturally opens the perspective in, wow, I've done a lot of good for myself. How can I share this and spread this with others? But if you go there before you're ready, if you go to, I want to do good to the world, you can easily be burned out or find yourself doing things for the wrong reasons or doing things to please. So as an idea, I truly believe that doing good to others is the next step of the evolution, but it's tricky because we can go there before we're ready.
Thank you. Beautifully described and very practical. A thought experiment. So like, if we had a different form of conditioning we're going through as a society, let's say we would be far further in our evolution, like we would not need to learn self-love, or like relearn it, like what do you think, like what would we be doing, like how would our society look like? And the other question, I think, like if you want to talk about it, it's, what I remember you talking a little bit about your experience also, like from the, like growing up in Israel, and you also been to the military, and I mean, it's a continuous game every day. It's like to realize how subjective your perspective on life is, like and putting yourself in the shoes of other people, like and like getting getting more and more understanding. Like it's not fully there, but it's more than it was like, like a couple of weeks ago or years ago. So it's just this gradual progress without really having 100% understanding of what it is. But I'm just saying, like, in the end, like everybody does the best he can from the current set of information he has, no? And like from that perspective, like in a way, everybody is right and nobody's right, and like. And you touched upon a couple of times the conditioning we're going through, and it would be really, really interesting to maybe from an own experience, if you want to share how your perspective changed. And like I know that especially Israel and the Middle East, no, it's a like kind of a powder a chamber, like very explosive and very controversial and different opinions, and most probably also really a strong indoctrination with certain beliefs on both sides, or like all sides, no, like as we have it here in Germany in a different, or in Switzerland also, yeah. But that would be really interesting to maybe hear how it changed, and
I'll be happy to share. So which one first, my story or the future of
as you feel like.
Okay, so I'll start with myself. That is a big part of my story, definitely the changing of perspectives, because I think this is a big part of the evolution of each individual, is really moving out of the conditioning and moving out of the environment that we saw as the only truth or as the only reality, and starting to see that the world is maybe different, and is there are more than one perspective, and you can see that in different ways. For me, traveling helps a lot, because you kind of go to a different country where people have different priorities and they have different habits, and you kind of see a different culture, and it gives you a lot of perspective on your own culture. So that's a really simple thing that a lot of people do, and it kind of gives you that perspective. But when you don't necessarily give it the attention of taking it as a lesson of learning about your perspective, you go back into your own world, in your own country, in your own life, and you continue whatever you were doing before. But it has the potential, as this time that we're in right now has the potential, because it kind of pulled us out of whatever life we were living before, and we're experiencing something very different. And there might be a going back to that, but this perspective has the potential of changing a lot of how we think. Um, so for me, I had the religious aspect of my life, growing up in a Jewish religious home, and the political, being in the Israeli military aspect of my life. And these are really two big things that in my early 20s, they shifted from one side to the other pretty drastically. It took time, but it was an awakening, because it was suddenly, wait, the religious practices I've been doing for 20 years don't resonate with me anymore, and everything I've been told and believe isn't, I don't like it or feel like doing it. And it's like a question of, what are my values, right? And I have a mix of these very conflicting values of religion, and the rules of the religion are important. In Judaism, keeping the Shabbat, not using electricity, all these things. And at the same time, the values of family. And, at the time I was with my girlfriend, who I couldn't see for weeks at a time. And I wanted to talk on the phone on Shabbat, where I wasn't supposed to use my phone. And I was kind of like, what am I supposed to do? And I chose the value of family as a value, which my girlfriend was expressing at the time, but that was stronger than the value of keeping the religion as the religious rules were. So I had a few of those moments where I could see all the things that I was taught or told in a different perspective. So the political, world of Israel, where I grew up believing that the military is the way of protecting my mother and sister at home from potential terrorism, which I grew up with in Jerusalem in the early 2000s. There were buses and terrorist attacks on a weekly basis, and it was real. And everything I knew was that the military is here to protect its civilians, and that this is the only way, and it's necessary, and uh, this is our identity as Jews and Israelis in Israel, is to be in the military and protect your people. And only after going through 4.5 years of military and being an officer did I come out on the other side saying, me as a person, do I want to participate in this? Do I like carrying a gun and needing to potentially shoot someone? And for me, even though the doctrination and the belief made total sense of someone who's bad, who's coming to kill me, I want to protect, or not even me, what if they want to kill someone I love? It's clear that this is the truth, that I need to protect my loved ones. And at the same time, it's like, this doesn't resonate with me as a person. I can't believe or pretend to believe what I've been believing and still be aligned with what feels good for me. So that change of perspective kind of, and it left me in this in-between state where I'm like, okay, so what do I believe, and who am I, and what do I do? And it really triggered that. I would go to the opposite other, and the pendulum. So that's my experience, where I had to reject fully my conditioning and go to the other side of conditioning, which is I'm rejecting. And this is a kind of conditioning too, where I'm saying no to what I've been conditioned with.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a kind of relaxing into somewhere in the middle where I say, okay, I got that. I grew up with that. I've rejected it and gone to the other side. But can I see that both exists at the same time? And they're both equally true. There you are.
Yeah, there was a little internet trouble here. Sorry
Got
to say
it.
that. I lost you when you said they're equally true.
Yes.
Yeah.
So by kind of being fully embodied on both sides of the spectrum, like when I was believing that fighting for the Israeli Defense Forces was the best thing, and when I believed that it's the worst thing in the world and that there's no such thing as a moral military, and that, the complete other side of the spectrum. And I really believed that as a belief system, like I could reject that completely. I really could feel after going to both sides that I can find my way into the middle, where I can see people who are here without judging them, and see people who are here without judging them, because I know that I was there and I was there. And by being here, it could be an escape or pretending not to take a stand. But when it's embodied and it has that kind of truth and honesty, that I'm not lying to myself, then it can encompass, it can hold all the parts together, and it kind of has the potential for that new sense of reality. And if I take it to the first question, then it's really, I can only get here when I have that sense of self-love, because I'm not fighting in either of the sides. I'm in a kind of struggle, or I'm kind of being led, and I'm not connected to that love that's in me. So when I've done that, and I can find my way into the center where I'm not pulling or pushing or resisting or fighting or blaming. There's a lot less of that resistance and a lot more of this compassionate understanding of others. It can really transform the world. And it's just interesting for me. This is something that's been on my mind as I follow the last few weeks and all the different views of what's going
Mm.
on in the world, and the forces of light and evil, and uh, in both cases, all the voices almost that I've heard are, there's the light and the evil, and it's really two-sided, and there's always the other side that we're blaming, and that they're wrong, and that someone is, but, and for me this is nourishing a lot of the suffering and a lot of the bad things that I feel are harming the world by resisting it or by fighting against it. I do believe that there is something, like there are things we can do to say or to identify when something is unjust or wrong in the world, but the way we say it, it's like that when we come from that nonviolent, compassionate place, it really can change the way things will change. It's hard for me to believe that governments can evolve or change their way of making policy by a lot of people telling them that they're wrong. And if I could imagine the way things could potentially be, if I'm letting myself imagine, it's that the people look at the governments or look at people who are, you know, in the destructive part of their being at the moment, which we all have, and telling them, you know, we understand that you're in your destructive part of of your being, and we can be compassionate and forgiving, and we wish for you to make a better choice. And it has a different attitude towards, like, you're wrong and you're horrible and you're ruining the world, as opposed to like forgiving even, or sending love, or, you know, saying, I understand why you're doing what you're doing, because you're in an internal struggle, or you're not aligned with your path or for your growth, and you've taken a wrong step, and I can understand that, because you're human and I'm human, and I've made wrong decisions too, and I've gone the wrong way. And by saying, having the force of people resisting the government will have the same force of people being compassionate towards the government, I can then see a transformation happen in which someone in the government can say, wow, maybe I made a mistake. Because as long as I'm being trying to be proven wrong, like everyone is telling me I'm wrong, I'm wrong, I'm wrong, all I can think of is I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. But if someone says to me, it's okay, you know, you make mistakes and we just want the best for everyone, and then I can say, oh, maybe I should take another look, or maybe I can change policy, or maybe we can, it's a different way of having a
Mm.
conversation. And this is how doing one good thing can lead to another. It starts a spiral that goes up. And at any point we can, if we're on a spiral that goes down, this is something in relationships, we see a lot. It's like we say a bad word or we get angry and we start this downward spiral where it's like one bad thing triggers another bad thing. At any point we can step out and choose to take a step up or do something loving or compassionate and start the direction that will then start going up. And then it has the momentum of choosing that loving or that forgiving or that compassion as the guiding path of where we're going.
Mm. Yeah, I have some thoughts about this, and
Yeah.
it first of all, thank you so much for like, for taking the time for sharing and educating us. It yeah, always adds a new perspective and extends the horizon. So always grateful when we talk. And like maybe you're up for a second session at some point, because actually I have like it just popping in my mind a couple of other cool topics to hear your take on that, and also about what you just said. And I know also that you do something or dig into something called recall healing, and that there are patterns repeating in life over and over again, and that there are so many things I would love to still speak with you about, but I propose let's take a pause for today and then continue in another session.
Sounds great.
Well, thank you very much, Eran. It was a true pleasure.
Mine too. Thank you, Simon, very much.
Okay. Yeah, super. Thank you.